Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar session this afternoon. This is the first in our series of the DEI Knowledge Exchange, and we are delighted that you've all joined us today. Let me firstly introduce myself. My name is Paul Modley. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion for AMS. And I'll be joined by a colleague today to help to run this session, and that's Judy Ellis. Judy is our head of DEI advisory service based in the USA. Now, the topic for today's session is very topical. In this current market, where it's obviously very difficult to source and attract talent, how do we remain focused on DEI? So I'm really looking forward to hopefully a very lively debate. Four experts today from a couple of clients, one from a partner, a technology partner, and one of our very own, somebody from AMS. So I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. So let's go in order of how it appears on the screen. Julia, can I come to you first?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Freeman. I'm the Director of Strategic Enterprise Partnerships here at WayUp and Yello for the past 4 years. And I'm really excited to be discussing some of the best practices that Paul mentioned around solving for DE&I when sourcing and attraction are getting tough.
Thanks, Julia. Beth, can I come to you next?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Beth Keeler, and I oversee the Global Talent Acquisition team at Merck in the US and MSD outside the US. Nice to meet everybody. Nice to see you today.
Thanks, Beth. Hermann, can I come to you next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Hermann Trepesch, and I work at Sanofi, where I lead our global diversity and inclusion function.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hermann. And then last but certainly not least, Vic.
Brilliant. Hi, Paul. And hi, everybody. I'm Vic Hyland. I'm Global Head of Attraction Engagement here at AMS. Great.
Thank you. So let me just set the scene. We are aiming to have a very engaging conversation. We've got a number of questions that we will be posing in the panel. I'd love it if you can use the chat box if you want to just add comment, if you agree, disagree, or if you've got questions that you want to pose to the panel, please do put them in the chat box and I will keep an eye on that as we go through. We do have a few poll questions we want to use also, and I'm going to kick it off with a poll question. And Sally from our marketing team, if I could hand over to you to help us to run the first poll. So you can see on the screen there, there is a QR code, which will take you to menti.com. There's also the link in the chat box. So yeah, whichever you prefer, if you just follow the QR code or go to the link and you'll see the first question that we are asking. So we'll give you just a couple of minutes just to go through that, and then we'll just have a look at the responses. So the question is, what one or two words describes the biggest challenge you face in increasing diversity in your workforce? So we're already seeing some words coming through. Busyness or business, I'm not sure. I love that. I think busyness, it's got two different meanings to me. I think we're all incredibly busy, but also the business is quite challenging to kind of work with in terms of this. Hiring managers, yeah, we're absolutely reliant on our hiring managers doing the right thing. Local focus, local laws, yeah, busy. Absolutely. Location, yeah, I think that's really interesting. You know, we're all working in a global context, so the kind of locations that we're working in. What else? Hard work. Yes, it is incredibly hard work. The market at the moment is kind of making it incredibly difficult to really focus in on that outcome. So I totally get that. What else we got? Competition. It's an incredibly competitive market right now. So I think we'll talk a little bit about this, how organizations can make themselves stand out in the current market. Sourcing, yeah, absolutely a kind of critical enabler really for us to have great and innovative sourcing strategies to help us to kind of get the sort of diverse talent that we need. Attraction policies and attraction generally, hopefully this is something that Vic will touch on in terms of the, I guess, some of the challenges and some of the insight that we're seeing with some of our clients. So thank you. Let's leave it there. Thank you for sharing that. We've got a couple of other polls that we'll also be running as we go through. So let me hand over to Judy.
Thanks, Paul. I think when we talk about DEI, and I know many of our organizations use various initials to describe each term and have them in different orders, but I know in talking with you, Hermann, that equity is particularly important for you and a focus at Sanofi. And I'd like you to give us just a sense of what you're doing there to really create a level playing field for all, if you would.
Thanks, Judy. And I think the first thing to do is to be vulnerable and accept that there isn't a level playing field, despite all the big commitments that we've all made on our .coms and all this support that we've got publicly for diversity, equity, inclusion. When we look internally, we've got to keep it real with ourselves and recognize that actually, are we doing enough? Are we treating this like a change program if it was some other type of commodity in our business? So that was the first step, is to just be vulnerable and accept that maybe we haven't done the best that we could do. And then just start treating this like any other commodity that really needs to drive commercial momentum. And for a D&I practitioner to talk about it like that, it's taken me a long time to mature myself to the point where I can view D&I as a commodity that can help drive commercial momentum, because I'm so passionate. I came from the ERGs, from the employee resource groups, and now I've managed to create a profession out of this thing that I've been doing for 25 years, right? So that's incredible. So at Sanofi, we're looking at it in two ways. I'm like the chief plumber. My job at the moment is to go around and find blockages in the pipes, the structure that makes this house that we call our company tick and work. Look for those structural barriers that are slowing people down. I'm the person, by the way, who put the thing about local laws in.
Okay.
What I can do as a D&I professional in the UK or in North America is really aggressive, and in some countries it could even be considered illegal. So when you're in 140 markets like we're in, that's a very difficult thing to navigate. So pushing equity and saying, well, what I can do in North America and Britain might be seen by some to be really out there and wild. How do I make sure that the person in Vietnam also gets the full 14 weeks at full pay? So quite simply, we've said, if it's good enough for North America or the UK, it's good enough for everybody. And that's it. Keep it simple, right? So there's that element, really auditing ourselves and then finding simple solutions to give everybody the same opportunities to grow and thrive. And then who do we spend our money on? So procurement is a massive issue. We've got a solidarity sourcing program. We spend about 6 billion euros a year on other people. And basically what we're saying is, hey, we're going to put 1 billion of those euros into diverse companies owned by minorities or women. And that's our way of giving back, but also recognizing that within those groups who often can't compete with big, massive blue chips like we are, it's about us cutting through and finding a way to equalize that opportunity and recognizing that there's a great deal of expertise and talent out there, and we just need to take the time to invest in it.
That's great, Hermann. I heard a lot that's very interesting there. And in talking about the nuances of different dimensions of diversity across different locations, how have you been successful at getting even capturing data? Because I know that's a challenge for some of us, because certain questions you cannot even ask in certain locations. Have your employees been participating and self-disclosing? How do you track that or get that demographic data?
So that's a key issue, and I think whichever D&I professional manages to bottle how to sort out the data question is gonna, they're gonna have a house on the hill by the time they're finished being told. But a little bit about me. So I was a police officer for 20 years, a detective for many of those years. I go looking for evidence. it's in my nature. So everything I do is evidence-based and metrics-driven. And one of the first things I did was, we're a French company, and France has got very strong views on ethnicity, for example, and asking personal questions. And me, I went and investigated how much of it is actually cultural versus legal. But guess what? In France, it's actually not illegal to ask people their ethnicity, believe it or not. It's a very strong cultural thing. So yes, this is really about digging deep and going and doing your homework. But more importantly than all of that, it's about raising the cultural competence of your people for them to understand the value in what we're doing, that it's not going to leave the majority behind. This is not to force you out. DNI is not here to hurt you. It's actually to build a better, all of us, right? So that we're all in. And if we think about who our customers are, we all say it. Our customers, we want to represent the customers and communities that we serve, right? Every company says something like that. Well, we're a healthcare company and a pharmaceutical company. Our customers come from every walk of life, every background. We've got to have an internal consultancy that allows us to think about and be those people. So we're voluntarily including demographic surveys into our engagement platform, and we're working with our partner with Workday to see how we can start adding it onto our formal HR systems. But it's a constant process of telling people what we're doing and why, and then telling them we've told them, and then once we've done that, we tell them all over again. And it's a gentle process, because for those of us who come from more aggressive D&I spaces where we can do things at a legal limit, for a lot of people, they've never heard of any of this stuff. So we don't want to take what's come before and just say, no, that's trash. Where we come from, we're allowed to do X, Y, and Z. We've got to be mindful of the legacy that we find, but also say, hey, how about we evolve this? Because the original vaccine that Louis Pasteur, one of our founders, discovered 200 years ago, the one that we're using today in the world is surely a better version of that, number one. So we have to keep evolving. So I can speak to the science behind DNI because I'm in a company full of scientists. So there's an equation to unlock the value in what people bring, the difference that we all bring. And we're trying gently to do that, one day at a time.
Thank you for that. It's interesting that as you talk about the different approaches we want to take to be mindful of the people and the populations we're serving. One of the things I think is so impressive, Beth, that you have talked about with Merck MSD is really understanding how to implement a skills first approach in recruitment of entry-level talents. Can you speak to how that's impacted your outcomes from a DEI perspective? I think it's interesting when we think about, as Hermann alluded to, a company that's very science and data driven, as yours is, that you've even been able to look at changing those requirements. Could you talk a little bit about that and the results you're seeing?
Sure. Thanks, Judy. Yeah, we have taken a hard look at this, and it has not been, I would not say when we first started it, that's exactly the reaction I got, was this is a pharmaceutical company, science-based, where credentials are really important to a lot of the roles we have. But the question that was becoming big and creating a need for this was, we would consistently, and I'm sure like many of my colleagues here, get requests for more diverse candidate slates. We would constantly get that request, and we'd say, all the different approaches we would take, but they just weren't creating different outcomes, right? So we were kind of taking the same approach, going deeper on it, working harder at it, getting more people focused on it, but it just wasn't really creating a difference. And so what we did a couple things. So one, we participated with a couple organizations who started to really, in a very small way, provide us with some talent. One in particular that we became a member of, which is called the 110 Initiative, but that brought to us the idea that there is there's excellent talent that is very focused on skills, but they may not have all the credentials. And when we started to look at how often we can, at companies, I think in general, Fortune 500 companies can open up a job description, begin a recruitment process, and immediately say, bachelor's degree and X number of years required. It's become so innate in a lot of what we do that people sort of stopped asking the question, is that in fact required for this very job for which we are recruiting? And so we started to look at some entry level openings saying, well, what if we did remove that credential? What does that do to the candidate the candidate pool? And so we looked purely at data. And I love that you talked about that, Herman, how data driven we were. And we said, okay, if we right now look at the available candidate population, layer on the credentials, layer on the pharmaceutical years of experience, then add our location, the available pool of diverse talent becomes so small. Then add to the fact that the market is so hot, you are putting yourself in a situation where you really aren't going to have a different outcome. So when I really showed sort of in a layered way, remove this credential, what does that do to the pool? And it literally changes the candidate pool just in terms of availability of people who may apply to your job. So when I showed pure data, I definitely got more support for this. I think we have done this through a number of methods. So we went to leadership teams. We talked about this at a really senior level in the organization because absolutely, as you said, it was not met by all groups with a lot of openness and a lot of, yeah, absolutely, this is something we could do. But I think as we started to really diagnose it and pick out particular job descriptions that were entry level, we really realized we were probably unintentionally limiting our own candidate pools. We were kind of doing it to ourselves, and we have seen a really terrific outcome. We are seeing immediate results. We are about one and a half year into the effort, so we're still early days, but we are definitely seeing big strides in this. So it's proven to be really successful. I think the one thing I just want to caveat here is that where you can trip up is that managers can change their job description, remove the bachelor's degree, but then when they see the candidates that apply, still tend to hire the individuals with the bachelor's degree. So it's something you have to kind of, it's not, you did that one, check that one box and then you're done. It's something that needs continuous reinforcement.
I think too, you talked about earlier with me about how you made even moving from first to second level roles easier by changing from an education reimbursement policy. Could you speak to that a little?
Yes.
Sorry, but there's a question that Beth, if you could address at the same time. There's a question that's come in from one of the from Charlie. You mentioned was it just for entry level roles, or is this across all levels?
No, it's not all levels. So I will say it's definitely not all levels. And just to be clear, we are in pharmaceuticals and there are many roles that do require significant, even medical degrees. So it's definitely not for all roles, but we do have, we have found some roles in various divisions, whether it be manufacturing or in sales, in our commercial divisions where we have not just done the first level, but the second level and the third level. And one of my favorite memories is trying to convince the leadership team to take this approach. And one of the managers who I hadn't even sort of tapped on the shoulder before the meeting saying, well, why wouldn't we promote a sales rep who didn't have a degree, who's knocking out of the park, hitting their sales targets, potentially exceeding their sales targets because they didn't get their degree? If they're doing exactly or even above and beyond what the job is required, why wouldn't we continue to progress that person within the organization? So yeah. I think it's definitely had, it's been a bit of a light bulb moment for us, but I think, again, early days, we're just about a year and a half in, and I'm excited to see us continue to get more traction. And I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, sorry, Judy. There is another question which I just want to throw in, and it's aligned to what you've just said, Beth. And it's from Mary. How do you get staff on board with this? Really, in removing the qualification, it doesn't mean that you're going to get lower quality of candidates. How do you kind of get your hiring managers on board that this is the right thing to do and you're maintaining quality?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. So one, like I said, we really started with a combination of our HR business partners and leadership teams. We did not start this with one-on-one recruiter talking to a hiring manager saying, hey, what do you think about changing this approach? So we got sort of a company-wide support for this. We actually, I was so excited before getting on this call, we actually even just did a company-wide article on this effort. So we've got leadership support, and that's really where we had to start. But like I said, it's been a journey. I did not some leadership teams took 1, 2, 3, 4 times that I had to, talk about possible outcomes. So it wasn't. It was definitely. We didn't start at the hiring manager. We started at the leadership team.
And you were going to answer about that reimbursement change. I think it's interesting to discuss. Would you mention that?
Sure. So we, one of the things we also want to look at is in our tuition reimbursement. It's not really reimbursement. We just pay for tuition if you want to go and get a degree, because we recognize, that sometimes even is another barrier, that if you're waiting to be reimbursed for the significant cost that education is, you sometimes can't save up enough money to pay out front and then wait for reimbursement. So now we are. It's a program in which we, if you sign up, we actually fund it.
And I think that's a really leading innovative approach that can help with social mobility as well, because as you said, just coming up with the income to pay for a semester of college is very challenging to then be reimbursed, but to have it be paid for and know that your organization is behind you, I can imagine the goodwill that buys with employees as well.
And just one caveat on that is our approach in the US. And so, MSD outside the US is every country has a different bit of program. I just want to put that one caveat in.
Yeah. And I see Hermann has put in that many, in my view, organizationally reframing the diversity of a candidate as a capability and asking, is that where this journey begins? That kind of that specific cultural intelligence that comes from being a person of X, no matter what dimension of diversity that is really bringing something to the company and to understanding the business and the markets. I know when I worked at a CPG company, colleagues of mine helped to convince them to enter into the ethnic hair care market, where they weren't thinking about even entering, and now it's a very profitable area because they brought that understanding that an African-American consumer with curly hair uses a ton more products than a regular consumer. And so it's really making a business benefit. Hermann, I don't know if you wanted to add more about that.
Yeah, I concur. In a previous role, that's what I managed to do. And the first thing was publishing my ethnicity pay gap, despite not having to, and owning the terror that was in our senior managers' minds when they saw how awful the ethnicity pay gap figures were, and saying, well, if you want to close it, we need to reframe how we look at talent and how we judge talent. And then when we hire diverse talent because of their capability they bring, adjusting the KPIs of those managers who are going to teach them how to do it and slow down a little bit to give them that space to grow. So it's an organizational thing, right? It's structural. It has to be led by the top, saying, okay, we can, B+ is okay because you might not have that degree, but you bring incredible talent and diversity of thought. And that's more important than yet another degree from yet another university, like every other one we've got.
That's such an interesting point. I think you've both highlighted
Great
the importance
segue as well.
of leadership buy-in. And I know, Beth, you've also looked at some new ways of proactively implementing pipelining for senior talents in the diverse space. Can you speak to that and talk about what kind of results you're seeing there?
Sure. So we actually created a team of sourcing capabilities, because we feel like one of the things when we were diagnosing, again, why aren't we making more progress? The biggest challenge you'll find in not getting a diverse candidate slate is time, right? So there's availability, but there's also time. And I think what we were finding is job comes open, manager does emphasize, I'd love to see a diverse slate. But the issue is there's a vacancy, it's causing pain. And they say, okay, well, we've got a good slate. We're not super happy with the diversity of our slate, but we really need to get this job filled. It's causing big downstream impacts, especially at the senior levels. And so I think what we changed our approach to do is stay really close to the business, understand where it's going directionally, and start pipelining. And this is definitely an approach you have to take with a long view in mind. This does not happen overnight. You do not suddenly wake up with a network of amazing, diverse candidates. It's something you really have to cultivate relationships, get to know talent, understand where they are at. And then as you are connecting with those candidates and jobs do become open, we've taken two approaches. One, as we identify awesome candidates, is there a possibility to even proactively hire them prior to an opening coming up? Or we have a network, and when an opening does come up, we are better prepared to react. So we're not in that, oh my gosh, the clock has already started ticking. What's the best we can do here? So I think it's all about pipelining, networking, and being proactive. And many times I think our roles are now just about mapping. We are anticipating, we're worried, there could be turnover. This is a hot space. And so I think our managers have also gotten on board with it quite a bit. It creates a new challenge if you're looking at just metrics of hires, because you're doing tons of work. It's not always resulting in hires, but I think that's also about just educating your organization on what you're trying to do. So I think and that has definitely led us to different results than what we've seen before.
Thank you. I do hear that having that long view is important, because a transactional lever you push or pull here or there may not give you that kind of result that you want in the end. And I know I'd like to talk to you, Julia, about ways that WayUp is supporting clients in the U.S. with increasing their diverse outcomes in early careers recruitment. I know you have great data visualization tools and others, but happy to hear what you have found successful in your space.
Definitely. First and foremost, I have to share that I identify so strongly with what Hermann had mentioned about the importance of being really vulnerable with diversity, as well as looking at the science and data by both he and Beth, because admitting that you need help in this journey is really the first step, and there's no shame in utilizing a technology that's built for this type of support, whether that's WayUp or maybe some sort of homegrown system that you're going to create. But for anybody who's unfamiliar with WayUp, we're a dual marketplace that serves employers with a demonstrated commitment to hiring diverse early talent. We classify early career as 0 to 5 years out of college. So anything ranging from internships to co-ops to rotational programs or early manager positions is everything that we kind of thrive in. Now, we're purpose-built for a virtual recruitment strategy, but we actually can complement your strategy for in-person DE&I conferences if you go to those as well. So that's just another area of support. But on one side of the business, you can think of us as servicing the candidates. So we work really hard to cultivate a strong user base. We have nearly 7 million users today, 71% of which identify as Black, Hispanic, mixed race, or female, so an incredibly diverse audience. And our partners can then utilize our EEOC and OFCCP sourcing tool to ensure that they're building that top of the funnel pipeline of diverse candidates, and then using our analytics to really identify those drops of where candidates might be falling off. Oftentimes it's for reasons that you don't necessarily think about. So Beth had talked a lot about the job description. So looking at the data and seeing if there's a job description bias between a particular gender or amongst a particular ethnicity is a way that we can help. We also will look at the data around your application itself. So maybe you have a GPA requirement that's negatively impacting your diversity, or maybe you're requiring a candidate to relocate, which of course is more uncommon in the pandemic now, but still happens. And if you're not subsidizing that dollar value for candidates, you're going to miss out on really great talent that would otherwise qualify really great for your positions. So that's kind of the candidate journey. And then on the employer side, the 4 main areas that we really focus on for diversity, knowing of course that this expands across many different avenues for so many of you out there, is going to be around race and ethnic diversity, gender diversity, veteran diversity, and then diversity of school as well. So you can filter by all of those that I just mentioned, in addition to first generation college student, as well as members who identify as being a part of the LGBTQIA+ community. One of the things that Beth also shared that I really identify with is the need to build that talent network early and potentially even hire candidates in advance. So we can work with you to understand when your hiring pushes are. Diversity and recruitment in general is definitely a long game. We've got to think about this from a marketing perspective as well, and trying to be a little bit more proactive versus reactive all the time.
Julia, I've got a couple of questions which I want to come back to, but can we just run a quick poll first and we will come back to you? So Sally, can we go with our second poll? And again, there's the QR code for you to use, or I'm sure Sally is going to post in the chat the link to Menti. There you go. There's the link there if you want to use that. And we'll just give that a minute and we'll bring up the answers on the screen, and Julia will come back to you. So, question is of the following: which is the most significant diversity recruitment problem that you face? So what seems to be the favourite at the moment? We're pressured to fill roles quickly, but finding diverse talent takes longer. Well, I think we've talked about that already. Beth kind of referenced that. You know, this is a long game. It takes planning. It takes time, particularly in the current market. This is not easy. So yeah, that is. I would concur. I think that's the most significant challenge, and then followed by we're not attracting enough diverse talent. Well. That's hopefully a point that Vic will talk about in terms of what we're doing with some of our clients to really help them from an attraction perspective. So thank you for your input there. Julia, I just had a really quick question around, and it's back to data. I think data is such an important element of all of this. How do you, and data disclosure particularly, why do people disclose their data so much in the US? Why is, because I think, I operate in a global role, and it's challenging as we look from region to region to encourage our colleagues to disclose their data. What's your knack? How do you do that with your platform that encourages so many people to disclose?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with trust. So within the WayUp sphere, every single one of our users is proactively creating a profile. So when you take that intentional step to kind of opt into something that is going to serve you, by nature, I think our users are just much more engaged and see us as this big sister that's here to help them start their careers and get the additional jobs later on down the line. Now, that's a different approach than, let's say, if you get a login to something because somebody sells your email, or maybe you're paying tuition for something. By nature, the fact that we're really seen as a support system, we're providing content to these candidates and servicing them in addition to the employers that we serve, I think just creates a little bit more trust and loyalty within our system to provide that great data to you.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point. I think that trust element is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
Judy, back to you.
I would just say, as you've alluded to, building that relationship with the candidate, which again goes into the long game, is so important, that you are communicating with them, not just when there's an open job rec, but it's talking to them about their interests, finding out what they want to do, supplying them information about candidates. It kind of touches on what you talked about as well, Beth, in your senior talent pooling area. Vic, I just would like to ask you what advice you'd offer up to organizations to support them in achieving diverse outcomes. I know you've had a number of experiences supporting many of our clients.
Yeah, for sure, Judy. And I think, again, like Julia said, when Beth mentioned about pipelining that long-term journey, again, I can't stress that point enough. I think we have to build that story as we're talking to our candidates, and we have to build their confidence in us, right? We have to make sure that they understand build that commitment, D&I, and that they have that confidence that we will deliver against that. And we're competing for a lot of, everyone's competing for the same talent at the moment. So as Paul says, that trust and that transparency is really important. And it's not about job boards. It's not about advertising. And, in many years ago, people would say, what job board should I put an ad on? And it's like, that doesn't build confidence. You're just talking about an open rec. It's about having, as I mentioned, having that real commitment and being really authentic in the way that we take our message to a candidate, and that's through the whole of the candidate life cycle as well. That's not just from an attraction perspective. And I always see it as a point that it starts with awareness. As soon as they hear about us as an organisation, right through to offboarding. So throughout their candidate journey, throughout their employee journey, a colleague journey, all candidates, colleagues and alumni should be able to articulate and be able to recognise what we stand for as an employer within the D&I space. And how I've seen this done really well has been about using your own people. And there's something about being able to bring your organisation to life. And I keep doing this because it's the virtual piece at the moment. We need to be able to open those doors. And the best way to be able to do that is by using our people. And that can really get that story going. And what I really like about people's stories is the fact it doesn't matter what size your organisation is. You can bring the DNA of the organisation to life through those stories. Think about what's important to those audiences. And I think, as Hermann was saying, one size doesn't fit all. And this is where employee resource groups have been really, really helpful for our clients and roles that I've had in-house. What is it that is important to people? What is it that is going to resonate with them? What is going to make us authentic? And I think the other piece from that, as we tell that story, is it's okay to Hermann's point, to be vulnerable. You don't have to have got it right. Actually, you can say that you're on a journey and you've made mistakes and you're learning from those. But this is who we are. This is our true self, and we bring our true selves to work. And I think, as I've said, using those stories is super important, and using the right channels as well. And to Julia's point, you know, there's some brilliant organisations and networks out there to help us do that. Don't try and do it on your own. As I would say, don't try and boil the ocean. Use those networks, whether they're internal or external, and use those organisations to help you. And again, swap that story, that question about what job board should I use, to what communities, what networks should I be talking to, should I be partnering with, who can help us to get our message out, because that ultimately will help us build that long-term journey that we're looking to do and help us to achieve those outcomes.
I think that's so important, and it speaks to real authenticity, especially when you have your own employees talking about what it's like for a person like them in the culture. I know when doing focus groups with DEI diagnostics, that message often comes through, that they want to see their leaders representing them. They want to hear, when they were making their hiring decisions, they were on LinkedIn looking for people that looked like them, to ask, what is it really like to work there for you? I know both of you, and you, Hermann, have talked about the importance of leveraging ERGs in that space. How have you been successful, or what ways have you gotten your employee resource group members in support of your kind of recruitment process? Do you have ambassadors? Is it a formal process, or what are some of the tactical ways you've employed using ERG members? Hermann, can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm like one of the most massive advocates for ERGs that you'll ever find, not just from an emotional perspective, but as a tactical tool. So I'm not saying rebrand them into business resource group at all, but be really transparent with them about what the problems are that you're trying to solve in the business, because they're partners of your business. They're shareholders, whether they own a share or not, they're shareholders, right? They keep the lights on, same as any other employee. So when I was the head of diversity and inclusion at O2 in the UK, which is where I came from prior to Sanofi, we actually worked with the ERGs on an internal mobility program when COVID hit, because we knew attrition would drop and disappear and no one would leave businesses. So we thought, well, what do we do? So I put my hand up and said, give me the money for the grad scheme. And what we did was we rebranded it into an internal mobility program. We used our pay gap calculations to calculate the gaps. And then we moved people from the lowest pay quartile up through the pay quartiles using the apprenticeship levy in the UK to pay for qualifications. And the ERGs were central to that, because they were the recruiting allies. They were the key people who were going out there and identifying what that talent looked like, and working with hiring managers to say, hey, reframe how you think about what quality is. Because before that, it would have been a technical qualification. Well, we're going to give you that using the apprenticeship. Right? So it's about just reframing how you see things. I think your ERGs can become very quickly internal consultancies, and a good consultancy does just tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes tell you what the problems, they should be telling you what the problems are, but also suggesting solutions. And too often we don't listen to our ERGs about what the solutions are. So I keep saying it, but I think reframe how you see value in people, and then trust them and be transparent. We used to show our ERGs everything. Sometimes they even had to sign non-disclosure agreements because they were seeing things that most people weren't allowed to see.
And Hermann, can I just ask you a quick question? How do you recognize their time? Because obviously everybody in your business and all of our businesses are incredibly busy doing their kind of job that they're paid to do. How do you recognize them for their input and their involvement to the ERG?
Yeah,
Do you do anything different?
I mean, I want to shout out LinkedIn, right? Because they're paying the global ERG leaders 20K a year for their 2-year tenures. And I'm hoping that's the evolution of what happens, and we all follow, because it's only right. People are contributing a lot of their time and emotional energy to these business issues, right? But most of us don't pay our people. So at Sanofi, what we're making sure we do is we make sure that every HRD so I've got like 38 HR directors in the global business. If any of them are responsible for a designated ERG leader, they must have a line in their formal objectives that relates back to compensation. So short-term bonuses, things like that, or depending on their seniority at global level. And by seniority, I don't mean the seniority in their day job. I'm talking because in D&I there should be no rank. Yeah. So a first-year graduate in our business could be the chair of one of our global ERGs, sitting as a member of the ExCom. They should be recognized accordingly. So we will sponsor their development in a way that they wouldn't ordinarily get because of their junior level in the business. So the investment is not money in your pocket, but look, would I take a master's degree? Of course I would. That's £12,000-15,000 a year. Yeah. So it's about formally recognizing people and investing them in that sort of way, and really giving them that access to the opportunities.
Okay. Just before I head back to Judy, just a quick reminder, we've got 15 minutes left, so we do want to make sure we've got some time for other questions. So if you would like to ask the panel any specific questions, please do put them in the chat box. Judy, back to you.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from each of you, and thank you, Herman. You started us off, but if you could give one piece of practical advice to offer up to an organization to really increase their DEI reach, given the current market conditions, would you please just share your advice? What one thing would you recommend, or what's a best practice that you've employed or seen used? And I'll come to you first, Vic. Would love to hear what your perspective is.
And I think, to be honest, for me, if we've covered it, it's our people and it's the ERG groups. And I was nodding frantically when Hermann was talking about them, because they are used very often as an internal resource, as an external resource. You're not going to get a group of people who are so passionate about a topic. And previously, before, when we were all out on campus, especially in early careers, they're absolutely your allies when we're out on campus and talking to potential candidates, because they will, to Hermann's point, they will tell warts and all, for not being able to think of a better phrase, but they will tell candidates exactly what it's like. And that's what you need, because when they join, we need to make sure that that is the experience that they have, and they're proud to want to continue to tell our story for us.
I think that's so important. They do have a tendency to be very authentic and real. And I think you alluded to it, Hermann, that we have to be prepared, good, bad, or indifferent, for our candidates and employees to be really authentic and share what's really going on, so people have a good understanding of what they're walking into. Beth, would you like to share an additional strategy or tactic or best practice you've seen in this space?
Yeah, yes, I would. Thank you. And I think, as we've started to change our approach, so, using skills first as an example, I think the other thing you really need to do is advertise that, put it on social media, make sure the world is aware, because I can tell you, people don't naturally think of pharmaceuticals as one that would be thinking of skills first hiring. I think people do associate it with research and science and MD, PhD type background. So we have also been branding this approach aggressively, both on, whether it be on billboards, in transit hubs, in social media, on YouTube. We've been talking about this to get there to be a different approach. And that we are interested in diverse talent. So I would say, don't forget to tie all the pieces together. It's not just about the action. It's also about making sure everybody's aware of the action too. And then one other thing, which I just want to reference is, I do think location, that's one of the great outcomes of the pandemic, is the fact that so many roles have become virtual. That does open up bigger talent pools, and so I think you have to take advantage of that. If you can't convince a hiring manager to post a job as remote, you're going to have access to so much more talent than if you are just sticking to your typical location. So I would put that one as another one, if we can convince managers to maintain this as the world moves forward.
I think both of those are so important, and communications particularly. I've added that kind of work stream into our diagnostics, because so many organizations that I've worked with, I've been impressed by some pocket or nugget of work that they're doing that other employees I talk to in the same organization aren't even aware of. So doing the work of your internal comms and change management about what actually is working or what results you are having. And even more importantly, I think you alluded to it early, Herman, selling the problem, so to speak, explaining why we're actually investing in DEI work. What is the missed opportunity that we have? What are the markets that we're not in? What is that cultural intelligence we're not tapping into, so that people have an understanding of why our organization is investing in something that they may not have understood to be an issue. Julia, I don't know if you'd like to share anything else about one of the things that you've seen really be successful, or an insight you've seen in maximizing this space.
Absolutely. Even an HR function is meant to, promote and be well established for a company to breed profitability. DE&I makes a business more profitable at the end of the day. And if we can speak to hiring managers and business leaders in that lens as well, and kind of speak their language, meet them where they are to really prove that with the data, the proactivity that you approach this with will make the business more profitable. And the sooner you can get in front of hiring managers to get their JDs prepared, to even understand what your timing looks like for launch. Most of our partners, we start building that pipeline of talent in June for fall. So you're getting really ahead of the game and trying to meet the candidates where they are. And then throughout the rest of the year, we're building that pipeline. So it's gone are the days or the seasonal approach with early career, I find, where, it's a 3-month spurt. And that becomes difficult for recruitment professionals on this call. It's a burnout job. There's a lot of things that just continue in the long term. So if you are finding that you need help, which again, there's no shame in, we're all on this journey together. I would definitely recommend having those conversations as early as possible and building out that long-term strategy together.
Right. We've got a couple of questions. Thank you, Julia. We've got a couple of questions that have come through. The chat one from Harry. In light of, this is a US oriented question, in light of Brian Flores' filing in federal court accusing the NFL of not properly enforcing the Rooney Rule, what do you think about the legal requirement for senior roles having a diverse talent list? I don't know who feels comfortable to address that question. Beth, I don't know if you feel comfortable addressing that.
Yeah, I don't think I know the specifics of the Rooney Rule enough to be able to speak to that in any way.
Does anybody, Judy or Julia?
Yeah, look, I'll make a comment in a personal capacity here. I'm in favor of anything that balances this world. The Rooney Rule is beautiful. It's unfortunate that we have to have it. Hey, the reality of this world is that there is disparity, there is discrimination. And unfortunately, human beings are very tribal. Yeah. And we're not going to just we're not going to be able to altruistic our way to a better world. That's why we have laws. We live in, you know, I think there comes a point where you've got to go out there and create the change you want to see.
Yeah, and I have to say, we, from an AMS perspective, following the George Floyd murder, we kind of looked at our organisation and realised it wasn't representative of the communities in which we operate and of the wider population. So we adopted the Rooney Rule approach for all of our senior hiring, and it has made a difference. It really has made a difference in the last 18 months. So it's something that's worked for our organisation. So yeah, conscious of time, we've got 8 minutes left. No, just a reminder, if anybody else has got any questions, then please ask those questions. Sorry, Judy, go ahead.
That's fine. I was just going to pick up on what Hermann said. I find many of the organizations we support have instituted various versions of the Rooney Rule. The research shows that if you have multiple candidates from diverse groups on that final slate, that you're much more likely to choose a person to hire that is from a diverse group population. And it's interesting that there are studies when you've required just one person to be of difference, it didn't make any impact at all. So I still have not seen practically, some of my clients have said even adding one person from a different background really has made a difference, although the broader research is saying the more you can amplify those voices, as well as including diverse interview panels, is really important, so that they're assessing, the assessors themselves come from those diverse backgrounds. Herman, I think you had a hand up.
Just really quickly, there is an example of where positive discrimination has been changed to become legal, and it's worked. The Police Service of Northern Ireland actually changed the law in Northern Ireland to positively discriminate for the hiring of Catholic police officers. And it was live for 15 years, and it went from 8% Catholic police officers to over 50% in 15 years, so it went over that critical mass. Now the law has been changed to remove the positive discrimination aspect, and it reverts back to normal UK law under the Equality Act. But it's self-sustaining now. So we've seen that it can work. It's changed. So there are examples of it working. In the UK, we've got the Equality Act and positive action rules. This can work. You just got to be really mindful and be friendly with your employment lawyer to make sure you don't end up in we don't want to do anything illegal, right? I was a police officer for 20 years. I never want to break the law. I want to take things to their legal limit to make it right for people.
There is a question. Thank you, Herman. There's just a question I just want to pick up from the chat. Just make sure it's addressed in the last couple of minutes. And Vic, maybe if you could start to address this, and then if anybody else was going to view. So we will have we'll have companies on this call who are right at the beginning of their journey. Where do you start, Vic? If you've got a client come to talk to you, they're at the beginning of their DEI journey, and they want to kind of make some progress in terms of starting to kind of build their brand, attract external talent. What do you say to them? What advice would you give to them?
My first question is, what does DE&I mean to you? And that would be the first question that I would ask them, to see, really, it's just to understand where they're coming from and how quickly that they want to go on that journey as well. Because it's not about me sitting here and saying, right, okay, well, we can do this, we can do that, do the other. I think we have to have the internal piece in place to make sure that, as I said, as soon as we look at going out externally, that delivers what the and I can't think of the word, what it's like internally working in that organisation, what the DNA is like. So before we even get into a conversation about an external attraction plan, it would be what's our plan in place to ensure that when we start to attract diverse talent into the organisation, they will be supported. And they will have the experience and the career that they expected from that organisation.
Right. Beth, anything you would add? If a friend of yours or a colleague, somebody approached you and said, "Oh, we're at the start of our journey. What do we do?" What would you say to them? What sort of one piece of advice would you give them?
Honestly, sometimes I think that might be a good thing, because instead of undoing things, you
Yeah.
get the chance to take it from a fresh start. I definitely agree about the diverse panels. Like, if you can start right out of the gate that is a practice you're going to use structured selection so that you are consistently, having an interview process that looks the same. Questions are asked in the same way, that you're putting everybody through the same process to remove bias as much as possible. And then I would say, draw a wide net, whether, again, location, skills, focus. I think you have to be intentional. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is you can't just hope for the best. You really, really do have to be incredibly intentional. And I would also agree with the EBRG lead. Oh, I'm sorry, we call them EBRGs, ERG leads, being, actively involved right from the beginning, that they are helping you and telling you about sources and where to find candidates and have them participate in the process. I think all the things we've talked about, but I would, as much as you can, start at the beginning and don't assume, you've been open and posted jobs that's suddenly going to get you a good outcome, because especially in this market, it won't.
Yeah, absolutely. I am conscious we're starting to lose some people already, and it's a couple of minutes before the hour. So let's draw it to a close. So firstly, can I thank the panelists for your time and your input and your contribution to what's been a really brilliant conversation. So thank you for all of your insights. Thank you, Judy, for fielding the questions. As I say, this is the first in a series of webinars that we are planning. We've got our next one on the 28th of April, which is disability oriented. On our landing page, you'll see all the details, and we'll be pushing that over the next couple of weeks. So all that remains for me to say is thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you.
Thank you
Thank you.
for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.